Hello, this is Margaret Ajibode, the STEM Positive Disruptor. And today, again, I have my special guest. He's a special guest because we've been on this journey for 4 sessions. So this is the last session today. And it's about legal identity. Guy Huntington, he's an expert in identity architect. He created a new legal identity architecture for humans and AI systems. He's taken us through a journey from the first session. He talked about to understand why he took this. He felt there was a need for this new system. And then the second time he spoke about legal identity. The third stage he talked about security and privacy as well. And today he's just going to finalize and round it off. But again, please take note because I really do want you to understand his journey has been 8 years going. He's only given us a taster of the real thing. So if you really do want to know more about this, then you have to contact Guy and let him explain more, give you more details why, the reasons behind, and more detail about it. I'll be putting some links out as well for you because the reason why we set up this platform, we want to educate, want to raise awareness, want to change perception and demystify. And guys coming with a new idea, new way of thinking, new idea of how do we protect ourselves and everything else. So without further ado, welcome again, Guy.
Thanks, Margaret.
No
Hi, everybody.
problem.
I'm Guy Huntington. You can reach me at GUY at hvl.net. And the best way is to read the stuff I put on LinkedIn. There's over 150 articles. So take any one of my posts I put up on LinkedIn, go down the bottom, and you can scroll through them broken out by subject areas. And it's really complicated. I want to begin by talking, before I get to costs and politics, I want to tell you why I began this journey, which is I began the first one, which is I really wanted to rethink learning, not legal identity. And to rethink learning, I realized way back then we had to rethink legal identity. So if I've tagged your interest, go back and watch the first podcast, and you'll learn all about learning. So with that proviso, let's talk today about politics and money. And this is the bottom line. So when I set out on my journey 8 years ago to rethink learning and legal identity, I intuitively realized it would cost lots of money. Why? Well, it's going to change how local CRVS systems, which are civil registration vital stats, their registries, birth, death, marriage registries, and schools work. And thus, I knew that the architectures must give a first guesstimate at costs. And I realized with this, government leaders and their policy analysts could then begin to understand what's in front of them. So I prepared a 503-page cost-centered doc, which contains vision and 294 different cost centers. It's a lot of work. And so what's the bottom line? What's the projected cost for doing all this stuff? And my guesstimate, it's just a guesstimate, is it's going to cost between 21 and $35 billion over 3 years. Now, then I considered what the whopper politics involved, because there's money and there's politics, and politics is what drives everything. And I realized back then that there are literally hundreds of different local, state, and provincial jurisdictions within each countries around the planet. And each one of them, they administer laws. Typically, they administer laws and bylaws and regs, legal identity, and learning. And so I realized they're very territorial. And they're going to protect what they have. And they're not going to want somebody like me to come in and say, look, we're going to give it all to the national government, because they'll eventually wave their middle finger at me and say no. So I realized any architecture I created must still leave them in control, but plug them into a global network. Now, taking all the above into the consideration, if you're watching all the podcasts, you realize how complex it is. You might be thinking, Guy, what are you smoking? Don't you know there's no way this will happen anytime soon? Don't you know how governments really work? And you know what? They're absolutely right if one is looking backwards to judge what's coming at us. However, there's a quote by Milton Friedman, which I really like. Now, push aside your views on Milton Friedman and his politics and his economic theories, push that to the side. This quote is really accurate. It says, only a crisis, actual perceived, produces real change. And when that crisis occurs, the actions that are taken depend on ideas that are lying around.
That's
That,
right.
I believe, is our basic function, to develop alternatives to existing policies, to keep them alive and available until the politically impossible becomes the politically inevitable. Now, I really like that because that's true. It's how world work. We get a real crisis, all of a sudden people leap in action. So what's the crisis that will occur? Well, it's obvious. Our current inability to determine digital entity friend from foe, which is in podcast 3, we talked about. So it's inevitable that either an evil link, which I talked about in podcast 3, or a malicious state will leverage an AI system somewhere on the planet, and it will produce increasingly malicious, smart digital bots at speeds of thousands or more per second, which in the next second are operating in all other jurisdictions on the planet, including where you and I live. And in the last podcast, I gave some links at the end, which are on the screen that Margaret's put up, and it talks about the sophistication of these devices. So they could be like this past spring in Hong Kong, there was an accountant who thought he was talking to a CFO on a video conference, and it turned out to be a bot, and it told him to direct the payment of $25 million to an Evil Inc. bank account. It was done. And then I referenced an article out of Australia where there's a girl who had all sorts of deep fakes produced about her. And she was really screwed because she can't no longer prove it's not her. Mm-hmm. So all this malicious bots is going to be leveraged on us, and it's going to increasingly produce these types of attacks. And what's going to happen at some point is they're going to be in such numbers that people are going to go, oh my God, governments, you have to do something. And that's when the political crisis occurs, and when all of a sudden the politically impossible becomes the politically inevitable. Okay, so with that, that's for the last year I've been contacting national security agencies in several countries around the planet. And I've also been contacting government leaders and their policy analysts, as well as departments of the ministers of education or departments of education. Mm-hmm. Okie dokie. So I then have written, most people don't have time to read all the mound of stuff I've written. They're not going to do that. So I wrote a series of one-pagers aimed at high-level people that explain quickly what's going on. So the first one that you should read at the bottom of this podcast is going to be a link called Why Should Your Government Fund the Architectures? It lays out 6 reasons why they should. The first is national security. So it refers to a paper called National Security Reduced Risk by Instantly Determined Friend from Foe. And that is the driving factor which is going to drive it. It's not going to be changing, learning, all this kind of stuff. It's basically going to be protecting ourselves. The second reason is give your industries a significant competitive edge, which refers to a one-pager telling them on top of the new legal identity architecture, your industries can build an application stack able to do in seconds what used to take days and weeks. And that refers to another paper within there called Open Network for Digital Commerce. And it is a very powerful argument. So with this, your industries can take entities, they'll be able to trust them, and then build on top of it an application stack, which allows us to do rapid things. Okie dokie. The third reason is provide your citizens new privacy toolkits addressing privacy. So the architecture refers, that one pager, I refer to a story I wrote about Jane Doe, an identity day in the life of Dr. Jane Doe. And it describes, of all the papers I've written, that's the one I advise you to read first, because it tells in story form. It puts you in her shoes as she walks through a day. And down towards the bottom, I have her doing 2 things. One is that she's maliciously attacked by a deep fake sexual attack, and how she is able within minutes to instantly detect it and disprove it. And the second one is that she enters a sex environment. Now let's pretend that she's a legal minor and not an adult. And I want her to be able to prove instantly that she is either a minor or an adult, and she gives her consent to enter the sex environment online. So there's that. Read that and learn from it. The fourth reason is rethink learning and training. So the architecture gives each citizen on the planet a digital learning twin, which produces and constantly updates a unique individualized education plan, an IEP, which goes from when they're a toddler to when they're old like me. So we have a new way to learn from when we're young to we're old. And it's going to allow, say, Jane Doe or Mary Doe. I wrote stories about Mary Doe. I talked about this in the first podcast, where Mary Doe's daughter is autistic. She's diagnosed with that when she's 2 or 3 or 4. She's then given specialized instructions. She leverages tech to do that. She's very gifted academically. And when she goes to elementary school, she can do university level courses in elementary school. That's like out of this world. type thinking. So the next reason is it works for all your citizens, regardless of their abilities or disabilities. So I talked in one of the podcasts about co-design. I came across a gal out of Australia, Marie Johnson, and she's been a world leader in leveraging co-design. And I then realized I should build that in the architecture, and I redid the entire architecture this past spring, building co-design into all parts of it. So what the heck is co-design? Co-design enables, has all sorts of people of learning disabilities and abilities. They have different ethnic values, races, and slang. It takes all of that and it takes the bundle of knowledge and it dissects it and allows you to have conversations with it in a variety of different ways. So if you're blind, there's ways to do it. If you have an ADHD, there's ways to do it. If you're autistic, there's ways to do it, blah, blah, blah. That's what co-design is. And so it refers to a paper on one pager I wrote, National Security, Co-Design, and People with Disabilities. The last reason is the architecture costs are designed with rapid innovation in mind. It has a 503-page cost center doc. I link to that. I've heard of the 294 different cost centers. And within that, I refer to a one-pager, which I again suggest most people read. Why should you read the 500-page cost center doc? I aim that at a government leader saying, well, why should you read that? And I say at the beginning, you, the government leader, shouldn't read it, but your policy analysts must read it. Why? And I refer to an example I created of what we're trying to create is similar to an air traffic control-like system. Now, when you go to the airport, you check in through the security gate, you walk to the boarding gate, you provide your boarding pass, and they basically verify your identity. The plane shows up. It could be Acme Airlines 12345, which is actually like a Boeing or an Airbus plane, whatever. And then the plane takes off, it flies through the air across all sorts of different jurisdictions, data spaces, and then you land at the end and you get off the plane and you don't think it was a big deal. Well, underneath the hood, there is a big deal. It requires all sorts of different laws and regulations and compliance and manuals and technical standards and blah, blah, blah. That is akin to what we're trying to do here. It's complicated. Now, here's what I see is going to happen. If I get lucky, before the crisis occurs, and I may or may not, one jurisdiction on the planet will see the advantages by doing this, and then they'll fund it. Or I'm unlucky, and I'll wait until the crisis occurs, and suddenly governments will realize this. They'll realize it's not two little steps they can take to address this, and they're going to have to fund it. Now, I have two last comments in mind. I'm on many teams I've led. I've learned to be very humble. Why? Well, on many teams I've led, effectively, and I've led lots of large global teams, a person will effectively say, Guy, YFOS, you're full of shit. Didn't you know about Y when you wrote about X? Duh. And I love it. Why? Because that's how bad ideas go down the drain and good ideas rise up. And then I get the team to test the shit out of it in all sorts of different directions. Now, that is me. And I have realized that I've created the best architecture I could using my brains. And I realize I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer. And other people brighter than me will come in and say, Guy, like, what are you doing? Let's change the architecture, blah, blah, blah. So I'm sure it'll change over time. But I've given the best shot I could to get us up and going. Now, the last thing I want to tell you about is on the last podcast, I talked about Pat Scannell and his technology curve, which summarizes up in one diagram the hundreds of thousands of words I've written and me blabbing away like this. And it shows a technology-shaped curve, which is it's like a logarithmic hockey stick-shaped curve. And he says we can no longer cognitively keep up with it. Now, that is what's coming our way. Every day that tech curve occurs and it produces new technology. And I've done my best to mentally work my way through it. It requires out-of-the-box thinking for our out-of-the-box times. And that is the bottom line. We have to think differently. End of my babble, end of me. The links are all at the end of the podcast. Over to you, Margaret.
Thank you so much, Guy. The reason why we set up this platform is we want to educate and we want to raise awareness. And this is what you're saying. People may initially listen or hear just maybe a few sentences of what you're saying, but really there's a lot of work that you've put in to come to this conclusion that there is a need. And you also mentioned about how technology is evolving so quickly and changes are happening, and why we need to take stock about how we do things learning. And I want the audience to hear you, and not to take it lightly. When I say don't take it lightly, I mean, we all have to come in with our own viewpoint, at least come with an open mind, and look at and hear what you're saying. And I do want them to have a conversation with you, because I think for you to have a deeper or better understanding, you need to be able to go in, I guess, in a way, come into your head, guys' head, and say, okay, but why did you ever thought this was possible? But all we have done in this four series is to just give you a glimpse of the things, of the investigation, the research, the work that Guy has done behind the scene. And I want you to listen to him. And if you have any questions, please make contact with Guy, and he's giving you the information, but I will let him tell you how to get in contact with him. But also the research he's done, as I said, he's done a summary of some of those things, where there's quick view of what's happened. But if you want deeper revelation of the 8 years of hard work that he's done, and because he is that expert, he's done the homework, he's done the groundwork. He has a reason behind why he feels there is a need for this change. There is a need for us to start thinking in a different way. And that's why we have this platform. We want to raise awareness, we want to at least educate, and then give you that information for you to make some informed decision. And that's what Guy is saying. And so, this is not, I was going to say this is going to be a conversation, but really this is about Guy giving us information about things, what he has done, and what the needs and why, the reasons behind, but also his journey, and the people he's worked with, or people he's spoken to, and why they feel there's changes need to occur. The importance of, we talk about the learning identity, the legal identity, about learning. And he said, look, I have my experience and what I've done so far. I know the reasons why I'm saying that. We don't always have to agree, but as he said, I think in this, not before he closing his discussion, he said, look, what I've done is put a foundation down. I've laid a foundation. Now it's up to you to look at it, review it, and see, can we do something slightly different? Can we add to it? Can we take away from it? And that's what I want you to do. I want you to really just be patient and just listen to what he's saying. Have a conversation. I'm sorry. Have a conversation with him, but listen to what he's saying. You may not get the full glimpse of everything he's done, but it's a start, it's a taster, and I hope you want more, and therefore you then reach out to Guy and get that, and get more information about what he's done. So Guy, I want to say thank you so much. I want to say thank you that that you agreed to do this conversation with me, or at least give us some information. Not so much a conversation, but really what you were doing is giving information, educating us about learning, the legal identity, about privacy, about security, and why the government needs to get involved. You talk about the evil ink. And I think also what you also try to do is not just about where the opportunity is available, but also where people who don't have the resources, and how we can make sure they do not get left behind. And I think this is so important, because again, it's not just about a certain type of people, but it's about every one of us, and seeing what do we need to do. Because now, as you mentioned in the third episode, you talked about how security or smart technology is taking over, how we using our glasses, using our clothing, and other ways as well. And now you've now come to this conclusion about the importance, the cost. Yes, I think of any change that needs to be made, it's going to be quite an expensive feat, and it's been aware of that. But as time goes by, that changes. But I think also it's also about your foundation gets I guess reevaluated, and people then see how we can better improve on what's already been set up. Because nothing in this world is new. What we do is we iterate that and improve on that. But I am saying thank you so much, Guy. I really am. So if you have a final word, please say and let them know where to contact you, and the reasons, just anything. Well,
Okay. Well,
within reason, that is.
my message to you, the viewer, is quite simple: is dive into the detail, read the high level, and then dive into the details a bit. And if it resonates with you, don't really talk to me. I'll talk to you. But you have to basically talk to your government leaders and your business leaders and say, we need to do this. Because without that, we're screwed. We're going to be attacked constantly. Our learning structures are built on old time-based models. Sir Ken Robinson out of England prattled on about successfully. His TED Talk is one of the most, 65 million people watched that. It's like amazing. And that's what I want. I want to take his vision and then make it real. That is me. So talk to your leaders and get them going on this. And it's a slow process until a political crisis occurs, and all of a sudden it will happen snappily. Thanks, Margaret.
And tell him how to get in contact with you again, please.
Sorry. So
Yeah.
you contact me, Guy, GUI at hvl.net, or you can go to my LinkedIn webpage, LinkedIn profile, and read any of the articles there. And at the bottom is a list of hundreds of different articles I've written, all broken out by subject areas, and you can dive down into it. It talks about sex, it talks about legal identity, it talks about learning, blah, blah, blah.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you again, Guy. Thank you for again taking time out to have this, or at least educate us about learning and the legal identity and the need, the reasons behind why it's so important for us to take stock and start thinking about it as well. So thank you so much. Thank you. This is Margaret Ajibade, the STEM Positive Disruptor, and this platform is to provide solutions. We are here to educate. We're here to raise awareness, change perception, and demystify. And the most important is about us getting a conversation going and help us to look at how can we use what we have and change our environment and what do we need to be aware of as well. So again, as I said, I do appreciate what Guy has come on board and his conversation, or at least him educating us of the need for new learning and the issues with or the architecture of learning and legal identity. So thank you so much again, Guy. Thank you.
Welcome.